We are back on Morning Line. Thank you so much for joining us. Beth Brown with us, Tennessee Education Association. It's our final segment with her talking about, what's happening in our schools. Beth, this is just our final segment then. So as we move forward now, where we sit right now, okay, what in your mind is going to happen next? As you said, this week we heard from the Department of Education, State Department, that, yeah, there may be waivers, to allow for virtual learning, but then many of those waiver requests were denied. So what do you think? Do you think some of this could end up in a court of law? I know that some of the schools are, just ignoring the governor's executive order. And if the governor chooses to put some teeth in that, there could be the AG filing lawsuits or back and forth. How do you think this might play out?
Couple of things there to unpack. First, I think it's going to be critical that the Department of Education goes in and remedies this vague waiver process. There are no clear guidelines, no thresholds, just this promise that the Department of Education is going to trust local school districts when they submit waivers. We've already seen, as you pointed out, I know at least one district whose waivers requests have been denied. So I think that the department is going to have to offer some clarity so that districts know what they can use as metrics for making decisions around moving to temporary remote instruction. I think the other thing that we've got to insist upon is that local school boards have the authority, are empowered with their authority to make the decisions that are best for the students, the educators, the families, and the communities that they serve. That is certainly in jeopardy right now. As far as lawsuits go, I will tell you that the TEA, after reviewing the governor's executive order, we weren't surprised to see local lawsuits filed on behalf of local districts, because Tennessee has a long history of supporting local control. That has been a fundamental principle of our state, and that fundamental principle has been called into question with the executive order of Governor Lee. And so we were certainly not surprised to see lawsuits filed after that executive order.
And just as we look ahead too, if we continue to have, some of these school districts having to close down for a week here and then another week there just because of too much illness, and we all know there's only a finite number of so-called snow days. I mean, I've heard some say that if this goes on as we've seen without any change, if they're able to even finish school, it's going to go into the summer months, right? Realistically, how far into beyond when school's supposed to go out can schools continue to make sure the kids get the studies done they need to get done?
So that's a very practical question. It's certainly a conversation that I was having with someone just this week, actually. Here's the reality of it. If districts blow through their stockpiled weather days because of COVID infection, and then we have the kind of winter that is being predicted, that is going to cause districts to have to extend the school year in order to meet the mandatory number of school days required by the state, so 180 instruction days. Two things would if they blow through their days and then we have a bad winter, one of two things is going to have to happen. They're going to have to extend their school year, or the General Assembly is going to have to authorize waivers of the 180-day requirement. I don't see that happening, but it's one of the possibilities. The other thing to think about is we have this new law passed this past winter that says that districts are now required to offer, a 4-week summer camp. And so if the school year is extended for this year, and then they have to offer a learning camp for students in the summer, you're right up on the start of a new school year with no break for students, no break for a lot of educators, no break for families, and no real opportunity to go in and do the deep cleaning that happens in our schools every single summer. So there are some very real practical considerations to think about if we don't get a handle and get a very clear process in place so that students can continue to receive instruction, whether in person or remote, depending on what the infection rates are in the communities. There's some very practical consequences that are going to happen.
Wow, that is interesting. Okay, I wasn't aware of how that plays out, but that's an interesting scenario. And it's important to note too, right? I mean, there are benchmarks that for every grade you have to meet a certain level of academic standing and pass the grades, whatever they are, to move to the next grade. I mean, they can't just, if they don't meet those, and I don't know how they determine if they've been met, but I assume usually it's through coursework and testing. You're not just gonna, if you end up only doing 160 days and if something crazy goes with the legislature, they waive it, just waive a bunch of fifth graders into sixth grade when they have not completed the required coursework for fifth grade. I mean, that's part of it too, right? I mean, the whole idea is we got to teach these kids. You can't just pass them on to the next grade because then they've fallen behind and it never catches up.
It is certainly a challenge, and it's one of the concerns that TA has about the lack of, or the discontinuity of instruction right now. We recognize that students need to be spending every single day learning, and so that's why it's so critical for the department to offer clarity, to create a very clear, efficient process for districts to seek waivers so that they can move into remote situations as needed on a temporary basis so that our students can continue learning, because we don't want students not to receive the education that they deserve. We are educators. We are committed to providing that education, but we got to have some help. We got to have some help.
Yeah, and I just want to reemphasize the point you made earlier, which I thought was excellent. Everyone agrees in-person learning, okay, is the best. Virtual learning created, correct, Beth, an awful lot of headaches and troubles, and some students had a real struggle with that. So you want to do everything to avoid it. But your point is, with no virtual learning even on the table, okay, that at least, though, if it was there, is better than nothing. And as it stands now, for instance, in Stewart County, which is going to be closed until September 7th when they'll reopen again, if everyone gets healthy enough. This next week, those students are sitting at home twiddling their thumbs or doing gosh knows what, when they could, if virtual learning was on the table, have maybe spent the past week learning, imperfect, but on a computer, right?
That's correct. And Stewart County is not the only county that's experiencing that right now. There are a number of districts, rural districts, that have had to make that decision to close. And because they're having to use their stockpile weather days, there is absolutely no teaching and learning going on. So that is happening in a number of districts across the state of Tennessee. And these are districts who have been very closely following the guidance from the state. The districts that have been leaning into their local control have not experienced the infection rate or the need to close that the districts that are very, very closely following the state guidance are experiencing. And so, again, just a whole host of districts across the state are closed for several days. And those students are not learning and those educators are not teaching.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, Beth? It's heartbreaking to me because I just worry that few decades from now, we look back at these 2 or 3 years, and who knows how long, hopefully just another year or so, and that these are our young people who are going to be our leaders, the folks who keep the economy going, who are going to go out in the world and work and try to make this a better place. And they're going to have a gap of their education during this 3 years because of COVID. Some of it can't be avoided because of the way COVID was, and virtual learning wasn't great. But I just worry that we're going to have a generation of students that have a 2 or 3 year gap of learning that was not up to snuff. And that's going to set them behind. And these are the people that all of us are going to depend on to be running this country in another 10 or 15 years. And I know that maybe paints an ugly picture, and maybe I'm being overly dramatic, but I'm sorry, that's the way I view it. It's just not going well.
Well, here's what I know, Nick. I know that Tennessee's educators are among the most committed professionals in our country. We are absolutely dedicated to making sure that all students are able to learn. I know that their commitment to the profession and their students, their professional integrity, will help them to do whatever it takes in the coming weeks, months, and years to help students recover from the disruption to student learning. That said, educators cannot do it alone. We have to have the support of our parents, of communities, of education stakeholders at the local and state level. We have to have everybody working in concert to make sure, as you pointed out, that our leaders of tomorrow have the skills and have the preparation that they need to live happy, fruitful lives. And it is going to take some hard work and some sacrifice on our parts right now, but that is what our kids are counting on, and that is what our kids deserve.
I agree, and I have no doubt what you say about our educators. It's just they cannot do it alone, and that's what we're looking at on this. Listen, Beth, thank you so much for coming on this morning. I really do appreciate it. We'll talk again, and yeah, there is always hope out there, and I have no doubt. It's just needs to be addressed right now, and I can understand why some parents might say, I'm going to get up to snuff. I'm going to start homeschooling their kids, not because they don't like the level of educators, but because the level of educators are not able to do what they think is best because their hands are tied. So, hey, do it at home where you know your kids are safe. Who knows? We'll see how those numbers play out. But Beth Brown, thanks for joining us this morning, and we'll talk again, all right?
Thank you, Nick. Take care.
Thank you so much. All right, Beth Brown, Tennessee Education Association. We'll take a break. Thought it was great, very plain spoken. Beth, cautious with what she says, but if you listen to what she says, yeah, it's a very, very serious situation, and a lot of things are going to be determined in the next few weeks, one way or the other, for better or worse, and let's just hope it's for the better. We'll take a break, and I'll wrap things up right after this.